This is the 864 podcast from Rob of the Green, providing you with some insights, ideas, and actionable takeaways in just 864 seconds, or 1% of your day, with the explicit goal of making you get a little better, even if it's just 1%. Here's your host, Rob O'Donoghue. Let's do this.
Hey folks, welcome to another episode of the 864 podcast, and this one is with the creator of a podcast series for ESPN called 30 for 30. The focus of this series is on Bikram Chowdhury, the creator of Bikram Yoga, and the lady in question is Julia Henderson. I was delighted when she came on to the show just after I actually listened to the 30 for 30 podcast around Bikram, the 5-parter, which I binged over the course of an afternoon. I said, this would be really cool if I could talk to the lady behind this, and she came on and it was really cool, and I'm looking forward to sharing it with you guys. We touch on a lot about her reasoning behind doing the show, discipline, learnings from the 18-month journey, and more. So look, I'll leave it there. Enjoy the podcast with Julia, all about Bikram Chowdhury and Bikram Yoga. Thank you and enjoy. I am very much delighted to introduce the guest, Julia Henderson, to the podcast. Julia, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
So, Julia, we got connected after, I think it was a Saturday about 3 or 4 weeks ago, when I downloaded all 5 episodes of the Bikram series, and I literally listened to them one after the other for about 3 or 4 hours and found it really fascinating, compelling listening, and was delighted then that you agreed to come on and maybe talk a little bit about it.
Yeah, I was really excited. You know, I'm really honored that people are listening to it and finding it, and I appreciated how quickly and how enthusiastically you reached out. I was really glad that you listened and liked it.
Brilliant. So maybe just tell me a little bit about your own background first off, Julia, and maybe even how Bikram Yoga became something of a fascination for you, perhaps.
Sure. So I work for ESPN now, with 30 for 30, making these podcasts, these audio documentaries. And the Bikram story was the very first thing I pitched to them when they hired me in 2016. So, I've been working on this for almost 2 years. Mm-hmm. And I part of the reason I had pitched it or was interested in the story was because I had done so much Bikram yoga, back in the day for so long. I had actually moved to New York right out of college, and I had gone to a theater school. I have a BFA. For the first chunk of my adult life, that was the way I told stories. And it was in that time that I was introduced to Bikram yoga by a friend who loved it and sort of understood that there were elements of it that would probably click with my personality, which they really did. So it's interesting, the whole phase of my adult life where I was telling stories, on stage and writing for the stage, this Bikram practice was a really important piece of my life. Mm. And then it ended up being, the thing I did I managed a studio for a couple of years. It was my actual livelihood for a bit. And then I moved and, I eventually moved out of theater and into documentary work and into audio documentary work. And, I worked in arts and culture and public radio. And then, when I got the chance to do something sports related, I had been following this story and keenly interested in it. And so it just felt like the right thing to jump into.
Bikram, the yoga practice itself, is one that I've started myself in the last really just this year. It's something I wanted to get into for a while. I find the mental challenge much more than the physical during a 90-minute class, and I think I do it certainly to relax, and the feeling afterwards is great. You talked about how you got into it and suited your personality. What was it about the actual practice, or is it that really connected for you?
It was a couple of things. I like a lot of people, I think maybe it's very cliche, but for me, the effort and the exertion that it takes, the amount that you sweat, how hard it is to stay in that room, how tired and exhausted you feel by the time you lay down that final savasana, it's a very rewards-based system in that way for me. I knew how hard I had worked. And I think living in a place like New York City, which is really tough and really fast and really competitive, going into a room for 90 minutes and working that hard for myself was something that kind of cut through the rest of the noise and really, gave me a sense of accomplishment and validation. It's very much about discipline. Like, it takes a lot of discipline to stay on your mat. It takes a lot of discipline to face yourself in the mirror and, to engage in that moving meditation day in and day out. And, I really was drawn to the discipline of it. And I liked, it brought a lot of things together, in 90 minutes is a lot, but at the same time, like, just 90 minutes where you are doing something that's good for yourself. You're taking time out for yourself. You're doing a moving meditation, but you're also getting your exercise in. It's actually kind of a lot of things you're checking off in 90 minutes. So yeah, I was really drawn to it.
So when you then decided to pitch the idea, it took you probably, 18 months to 2 years from start to finish, going into it, getting approval to go for it. Did you expect it would take that long? Can you maybe talk to me about the journey, start to finish?
Sure. Yeah, I was not sure, coming into ESPN and pitching a yoga story exactly how it would go over. But I think, my editor and the other people on my team sort of saw the bigger themes that are there in this story and were really, interested in them in the same way that I was. So, I was very fortunate that I kind of was met with nothing but support for this idea from the very beginning. And then it just was a really long, it was a long reporting process, but also a quick one. I mean, I will say, in the scheme of things, to get to 5 episodes of an audio doc and that amount of time was actually, it felt like a sprint to the finish the whole time. But it took a long time of connecting with people from that world and reading court documents and getting up to speed as much as I could on everyone that I knew to somehow be involved in different elements and different eras of the Bikram world. And then, it takes a long time, to get to everyone you want to talk to. I mean, I spent a lot of time on the road. I mean, obviously I went to Calcutta for this. I went to Mexico, but I went, a bunch of places around the United States, tracking down people, having conversations. I mean, I have hundreds of hours of tape that end up, in 3 hours in the final product. Mm-hmm. It was a big one. It was a lot of characters to talk to. I also talked to a lot of experts that you maybe don't even hear from in the podcast, but to better understand, cults and narcissism and exercise. And of course, Bikram is one of the most litigious people out there. So, I have been up to my ears with a legal researcher going through court documents for, the last 18 months.
Fun. What was the most challenging part of the journey that maybe you didn't expect going into it?
I was definitely surprised. I knew that the community was still really guarded and was really insular, but I was still, always surprised every time, like, having been a part of it, that it was still really hard to convince some people to trust me, and that it really was, it was a lot of work to get people to agree to open up and talk about this on any level. I expected there to be some roadblocks like that, but I didn't expect that this question of, trust and a sense of, just general misgiving or betrayal would be so prevalent still in so many people in this community. But it was really an uphill kind of battle to win people over.
So many layers to the story, I suppose, as you kind of got deeper and deeper into it. Was there any part during it that you thought, I can't continue on with this? Or was there any point where you said, this is too difficult or too challenging, that you'd have to stop?
No. It was really challenging and it was hard. And, there's a lot of the subject matter, you do have to stop every once in a while and think about yourself, or just, I guess, acknowledge that, you're spending days on end talking to people about trauma and then listening to them tell their trauma over and over again and trying to figure out a way to tell that trauma. But, this is one of the few things I've ever worked on that doesn't have a moment where you think like, oh, this is stupid. Why am I doing this? It's not going to work.
The journey then to actually meet with Bikram Chowdhury, can you talk to me about that, and what were you feeling as that became apparent that it was going to happen, and how that went?
Sure. Yeah. So, I obviously have been trying to get in touch with him from the very, very beginning. I knew it would be a challenge. But so it was a thing that I started early and kind of kept pushing at relentlessly. I spent the better part of a year in, sending ask after ask after ask to him and to his assistant. There was a point when the warrant was issued for him where his assistant, actually maybe considered giving me an interview, and then she kind of pulled away. And then ultimately I ended up, he's hard to know where he is sometimes, but he's teaching a training exactly where he'll be. So, I knew that the fall training in Acapulco would kind of be my last shot to get to him in a place where I knew I could find him. So I bought a ticket to Acapulco. I actually went on my reporting trip to Calcutta. And when I got back from Calcutta, I wrote him one last time and reiterated, that I was coming to Acapulco and I really wanted to talk to him and what, I was up to. And I let him know that I'd been in Calcutta and met a lot of people from his, childhood. And at that point, they agreed to meet with me when I got to Acapulco. As far as what I was feeling, I was very nervous to meet him. I knew from having talked to so many people how manipulative he could be. I also, know how explosive he can be. And I just didn't entirely know what to expect or who I was going to meet. So it was definitely, it was a nerve-wracking trip down to Mexico.
I can imagine. And were you kind of pitching it to him to give him an opportunity here to clear his name, to talk a bit more about himself in a positive light? Is that how you were trying to get an angle in, or what was the way in, I suppose?
The way in was to try to, I think my standpoint in communicating to him has always been that I was trying to make a documentary about Bikram himself and the yoga that was maybe more fulsome than anything that had been done to date. I certainly, didn't offer him a chance to, I didn't want to frame it in like, this is your chance to clear yourself. I felt like that would be a little bait and switch with him, but I was honest that, this is, I was honest with them, especially after the warrant came out. This is not a story that's going to go away. Like, he's gotten himself in some serious trouble, but these types of stories, everyone benefits by understanding them in a more fulsome way and understanding the whole thing. And that I was deeply interested in learning more about who he really was and where he had come from and where this yoga had come from and how it had gotten so big and how he had gotten so big. So yeah, that's how I framed it.
What did you learn about yourself through this whole process most, or what kind of stands out for you as you reflect on it?
I think I learned a lot of things about myself on the realm of, I ended up ultimately having to do a lot of the same work that I was asking people that I was interviewing to do. I had spent not only so much of my life doing this yoga, but, I had spent several years working for a studio and convincing other people to do this yoga, sending people back into the hot room who came out like sick or scared or overwhelmed, and so I had to do the same things that I was asking people to do and gauge my own complicity and ask myself, what I had signed up for and had, I been aware or had I missed things or, all of that stuff, which is, a telling grappling to go through. But I also, I think I learned a lot about my own resilience and tenacity. I think there's certainly points where if I had stopped in the middle of this, and lost my momentum, I don't know how I would have gotten back on that hamster wheel, but I'm very surprised. I think I learned that, I don't know, something about like the amount of work that you're able to do when it's something that, really matters to you. Yeah, I think I have more in my reserve tank than I gave myself credit for.
No, that's really cool to kind of maybe end it with that. I think that's a great takeaway that a lot of the times people they underestimate their ability to push through, especially when they believe in something so deeply, like you obviously did for the show. We're up to the 15 minutes. I kind of am tight on this one with the 864, the seconds and all of that tied in. What's next on the radar for you now, Julia?
Well, I'm going to get some sleep.
Watch some World Cup football. I see you on Twitter quite actively tweeting about soccer, so that's a good sign as well.
No, although my heart keeps getting broken, I'm very sad about Mexico. But yeah, I'm gonna get some sleep and try to have a bit of a summer. But in the immediate term, I'll be doing some editing and project managing on a couple of stories in production. And then, probably this fall, I'll start reporting something new for 30 for 30.
Brilliant. Well, it was a fascinating 5-part series that I can't recommend enough, and hopefully folks listening check it out. I really appreciate you taking the 15 minutes to give me an overview of the journey, and thanks so much. I hope you have a great rest of day.
Of course, thank you so much.
Thanks a lot.
Okay.
Take care. Hey folks, so that was the 864, 864 seconds or thereabouts, and I hope you enjoyed it. Was there one key takeaway that stood out? Was it good? Was it bad? I would love to hear about it. So in the few seconds that remain, and to be fair, I've probably gone over, but I have a few asks. Please do subscribe to the podcast on Apple Podcasts or iTunes so that you never miss another show. You've heard that one before. I would love if you leave a rating and or a review. All of these help get the show further up the rankings, which means more people see the podcast and then hopefully hear it. It means a lot to me. Follow me on Rob of the Green or on Spreaker.com/Rob of the Green. That's where all the podcasts are hosted, but on the Rob of the Green site you can get to everything. The 1% Better podcast, this one, the 1 Minute Monday videos, and you can also connect in with me through the website. There's a feedback page, or on any of the socials. Just look for @Rob of the Green or Rob of the Green. I think you get the picture. Finally, give yourselves a round of applause because you've all been so lovely, and thanks for listening. Have a great day and good luck.